that right there. I'll put this right here. Well, about yes, I do. That's the one that I found. Yes.
Are you okay with this? That's what I wanted to say.
Sounds good. Sweet. Wait a minute. It's not quite 7. Since Crystal's not here, I'll do my own timing, so I should take out my phone so I can do my own timing.
Yeah, I'll remind, yeah.
Okay. Winnie, Andrew, are we good to start? Okay, thank you. The board met tonight in exec session. We are now ready to start with the public portion of our meeting. We did have one piece of public correspondence this week from, or actually on the 24th of October, from Lynn Van de Stowe, I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly, about the incidence of pneumonia at Ridgewood Avenue School and the Glen Ridge High School. Specifically, her question was, is the district tracking these and other illnesses, and also do we have strategies for mitigation of illness? And we made a response, and also many of you probably saw the letter from the school nurses that went out with regard to the whole spectrum of illnesses that we're seeing right now, whether it's pneumonia, strep throat, et cetera. So the nurses are aware, they're tracking these things, and hopefully we won't have too bad, and the outbreaks won't be too bad this year. So that was public correspondence. The president's report, I want to remember 2 individuals who have passed away since our last meeting. Stephen Fitzpatrick, husband of longtime Forest Avenue principal Deb Fitzpatrick, who still lives in town. Both of them still lived in town. He passed away on September 27th. And then Robert Riley, husband of longtime Forest Avenue nurse Charlene Riley, who was with us for 27 years, and father of current faculty member Caitlin Riley at the high school. And her wife, Danielle Porciello, passed away now 2 weeks ago. So our thoughts and prayers are with both of those families. No, Ms. Porciello did not pass away. No, Mr. Riley passed away. He was the father of Caitlin Riley and father-in-law of Danielle Porciello. Thank you. Okay, since we last met, we've had all kinds of excitement. The kitchen tour happened, and many thanks to all who volunteered for that. It was a huge success. We will be at a subsequent meeting having one of those great big checks that we like to get with the proceeds. The organizers worked very hard in a year when it was difficult to get volunteers, and they somehow managed to get 10 houses and enough volunteers, and they went forward. And of course, they ordered a beautiful day, which happened. So it was a great success for those of you who went on it. We saw some houses that we'd like to live in. And we had the first townwide Diwali celebration on Sunday, lighting of 2 Diwa lamps. And it was colorful and lovely. And as you know, Diwali is the holiday of lights that is now part of our school calendar. Upcoming, we have the Ashenfelter race on Thanksgiving Day. I note an uptick in the number of struggling runners going by my house every morning who are getting ready for it. I would encourage you to, I don't know if the opportunity for sponsorships is closed out, but if it has not, go to the website. and support it, because both the house tour, or the kitchen tour rather, and the proceeds from the race come to the Glen Ridge Public Schools. The foundation exists for the purpose of supporting our schools. Every year, the proceeds from the Ashenfelter race, once the expenses are paid, are in the coffers of the Education Foundation, which uses them to finance all kinds of things, everything from Orton Gillingham to, some of you remember the refurbishment of the auditorium at Ridgewood Avenue School, now that it needs refurbishment again, but the refurbishment of the science room at Ridgewood Avenue School, virtual high school at the high school, and capturing kids' hearts at our elementary schools. All of those came from foundation grants to us. So without our home and school, our volunteers, and our foundation, we couldn't provide the kind of educational resources that we're able to provide for our students. So we thank the kitchen tour people. We thank the people in advance who perhaps would like to be home basting turkeys and are out on the streets handing out water or T-shirts or whatever. You can also watch the race. It's a great event for the whole town. So please keep that in mind. Also, in Trenton, legislature is out now. They're not campaigning for themselves this year, but they're campaigning for their candidates. But on Friday, the New Jersey Senate passed the Freedom to Read bill, which has garnered lots of publicity. It is a bill that has already gone through the New Jersey Assembly. It basically requires that school districts and public libraries establish protocols for book and resource challenges, and also protects school and public librarians from prosecution for distribution of pornography. So it is on the governor's desk. The indications are that he will sign that bill. And that is the president's report. Superintendent's report.
Good evening, everybody. Happy to share my superintendent's report space with my colleagues, Dr. Donovan and Mr. Lawler, who are going to walk us through the results of last year's state assessment scores, followed by a presentation on cell phones and future-ready learning. So I turn it over to Dr. D and Mr. Lawler.
I'm going to start off and talk about the NJSLA scores, and then Mr. Lawler will kind of roll into more of the higher scores that affect the high school. What I do want to just start off by saying is we do not have a test prep philosophy at Ridgewood Avenue School. We very much believe that the curriculum that we have in Glen Ridge, the teaching and learning that happens on a daily basis, is all in place and there for the kids to succeed. What the test scores have showed this year is that that definitely holds true. I know there's a lot of worry out there about learning loss over the last couple of years, and the scores this year are definitely speaking to the contrary. So what I like to do is look over at that far right column. That shows a combination of the percentage of students in the grade who have met or exceeded the standard. And so you can see there for third grade 80%, fourth grade 80%, fifth grade 86%, and a number that, and I've been here for 22 years, a number that I have never seen, 90% of our sixth graders meeting or exceeding the standard in language arts is something that I don't usually give this presentation. And I was like, yeah, I'll definitely come and talk because I really haven't seen these scores, and this is definitely something that we should be proud of. We've done a lot of work in the last couple of years when it comes to literacy and language arts, and then this year, this curriculum is actually under review. So it's really great timing. At the younger level, K-3, we've introduced phonics first. I think that has really helped. In fourth grade, we've introduced a morphology program. And then I also want to just draw your attention to the far left columns, the not yet meeting or the partially meeting. One complaint I have about a standardized state test is that we spend our whole year accommodating and modifying for students with special needs, and then the state sends us a test that those same students have to take the same test as everyone else. I don't think it's fair to those kids. But what I want to draw your attention to is even our kids who are receiving special education services, we don't even have many kids who are not meeting or who are partially meeting on this test. Programs like Orton Gillingham, certifying both general ed and special ed teachers, those are things that we're starting to see are really mattering when it comes to our scores. So just some scores there in language arts that we're really excited about. It's actually very interesting. I mentioned we've done some focus on literacy the last couple of years. Traditionally, our math scores are a little bit higher in Glen Ridge than language arts. And now we've kind of flipped that a little bit. So that would be ELA for 3 through 9 who take the NJSLA. This chart just shows you in the red, that's the state average. So when these scores come in, the first thing that I'm doing as a principal is I'm making sure that we are above the state average. And then you can see that the blue color is where we were in the 23 testing, and then the yellow is the 24 testing. So I'm looking to see that we are ahead of the state, but then I'm also looking to see that we are constantly moving forward. And so again, these are things that we're excited to be seeing. In the area of math, same thing. Scores are pretty equivalent there to language arts, but like I said, not as high. We're reviewing the language arts curriculum this year and then math next year. One of the things that we have done, we started last year at Ridgewood Avenue School, is we've implemented a guided math model. So guided reading is something you're probably very familiar with, and we've started to take that idea and incorporate it into our math instruction as well. That's something I expect to see over the next couple of years start to matter a little bit differently as far as math goes. But again, you can see in that far right column some great numbers as far as meeting or exceeding. That same chart where you see what the state average is, and then you see how Glen Ridge is doing compared to the state average, something that we are certainly proud of. Another chart there, that's a hard one to see there, but it basically is showing you that how much higher we are going as far as the test scores go. And you can see all this online if it's at another time you'd like to go through it. Science is a little different, and science is a little tricky right now. Last year, we reviewed the science curriculum, and one of the activities that Winnie had all of the science teachers do is to take a sample test. The NJSLA science test, and I hate to sound like someone who's making excuses for scores looking a little bit lower, but that test is so rich in reading and vocabulary and comprehension, and not as much science as you would expect it to be. That said, right, I look down there and I say, well, in 5th grade we had 61% of our 5th graders meet or exceed the standard. I don't love that. You know, that's pretty much like a D if you were looking at report cards. But if you look at that state average, and you see where the state average is at a 27%, it should kind of give you an inclination at just kind of how bad things are going with that test. That said, we did just review science last year, so I'm interested to see what our scores are going to be after this school year. It's something that we're looking at. Definitely want to see some forward growth there, but just know that it's not a test that I can. Betsy, were you going to say something there?
Question, Mike.
Yeah.
We teach our science is aligned with the next gen standards, right?
Yes.
But the test is not.
Correct.
Right? So that's the problem.
Well, there's a lot of problems. Yeah, with the test. So yes, it's not aligned. It's a little bit of us having to kind of do something that we don't love to have to do, is like figure out the test just a little bit to help the kids feel a little more comfortable on it. But that's okay. That's always good for us to have places to go and to grow. So again, you can see up there that they only take the science test in 5th grade, 8th grade, and 11th grade.
All right, thank you, Dr. Donovan. Good evening, everybody. Before I get into a lot of the middle high school testing, I just wanted to reiterate what Dr. Donovan is saying. And all the work that goes in at the lower levels from the pre-K through the second grade schools and then through Ridgewood Avenue. And it's really the foundation for what's happening here at the middle and high school. So, as I go through some of the scores at the upper levels and the success our students are having, it's really a credit to what is happening at the lower levels. And that we're receiving students that are at and often above grade level from their peers around the state and the rest of the country. Just kind of flipping back onto this graphic, we put this one up here. This is all Glen Ridge results going from back when the pandemic hit, and then to kind of show the rebound from the post-pandemic and what the momentum that's been gained since we've been back full-time in the last several years. Another thing, too, to look back at some of these, the graphs, and something we like to do as, data nerds when we like looking at this stuff is, you can kind of look at last year's 2023 and then this year's 2024, and you can see also a consistent level of growth from a cohort of students, which is nice also to see as well. So the growth is continual, which is nice to see the evidence of that. The first assessment I'm going to share with you is the NJGPA, that stands for the New Jersey Graduation Proficiency Assessment. This is administered to all juniors in March, and this is one of their graduation requirements that they must satisfy in order to get a Glen Ridge and a New Jersey State diploma. As you can see, our students are, again, building on the language arts and math success from the lower grades, have a high level of success on this exam, which is great. And we are proud to boast the fact that we have, at least in this class of 2024, 100% of our students met this requirement. For students that don't pass the initial test in March, they get to retake it in October. And it's a very small handful number of students. Once they do the retake, that unlocks a series of alternate assessments they can show for proficiency, and that can include the PSAT, the SAT, and the ACT. If a student doesn't meet that requirement, then they complete what's called a portfolio assessment, and usually we whittle that number down to less than 10 students, which is remarkable when we have peers in other schools that have dozens and sometimes hundreds of students that have to go through this portfolio process. So that small handful of students get additional support, and they work through the different standards that they must meet to show proficiency, and then we submit that to the state of New Jersey, get the approval, and then they get the stamp to satisfy that graduation requirement. Very similar to for the parents of younger students. It's very similar in terms of format to the NJSLA, so it's a computer-based test. The focus is on language arts and mathematics standards. Heather, yeah.
Yeah, is that the state in parentheses? Did you say what the second?
Yeah, so thank you. So for pointing that out, so you can see from 22, 23, 22 was the first year it was required, and then you could see in parentheses is the state results. So for example, when they say graduation ready, it means they hit the cut score of 725 on that section. So for example, the class of 24, 85.9% of our students were proficient in math compared to 54% of the state. So we kind of broke it down that way. Thanks. Next assessment that I'll share with you is called the New Jersey Department of Education's Seal of Biliteracy, and we administer this to juniors, also juniors who are enrolled in a level 4 world language. And at the high school, we offer French, Spanish, and Chinese. And the assessment assesses their proficiency in speaking, reading, listening, and writing in that language. And what's nice about that is, by demonstrating that proficiency, it's a pretty, high level of fluency, that they get a notation on their transcript that they have achieved this level in addition to their proficiency in English language arts. And it's just a nice way for them to note that they've really committed, right? And the state wants to recognize students that have committed to language and cultural education. So it's a nice program. And we started this 2 years ago through our World Language Department. It does a fantastic job. They also, these students are also able to earn what we call dual enrollment credits. We've partnered with Seton Hall University, and by successfully completing this course, they can also earn college credits too while they're here, which is great. The SAT, and next I'll do some slides on the ACT, are, again, college entrance exams that students take outside. So we do not actually administer these assessments here at the high school, but many of our students do elect to take these on their own. As far as preparation, though, we do administer the PSAT. We just did this a couple of weeks ago to all our sophomores, and then again to all our juniors. And it's just a way to help them prepare for when they elect during their junior and senior year to take the SAT. And with our school counselors, we added some additional data points so that you can kind of see different comparables to I'll get shortly to some of the area schools, but also to some of the universities that we see trends that our students are applying to and some of the score ranges that those acceptance rates are, so you can see where our students are kind of lining up to that. And going back to, you can see some of the numbers. So you can see last year we had 111 of our 145 students took the SAT. That is a number, in speaking with our counselors, that number has dropped from pre-pandemic, as a lot of schools during the pandemic and some retained that policy of test optional. So, but we are seeing a trend now. More and more students are preparing and taking the SAT and ACT again. This slide is kind of like a comp slide of different schools in the area. Just some notes though, like for example, Chatham, as we look through their school profile and scores, the last time they displayed their SAT breakdowns was in 22-23. A school like Millburn, we just left that blank because they only report their composite score. And then Livingston did not post any scores on their school profile. So if you go onto our website, you do through the guidance section, you look for a document called the school profile. It's a really very informative document that has a breakdown of how our students are performing, the courses that are offered, the activities, and that gets sent to the colleges along with their transcripts when they're applying. And here are the ACT results. You can see from the class of 2024 of about 140 students, only about 42 elected to take the ACT. So it's a pretty small sample size, but again, overall our students are doing very well on these assessments. Similar year over year from 2020, as well as some of the schools that our students have been applying to as far as trends and some of the score ranges that we're seeing them post on their sites in terms of the range that they're looking for from their applicants. Okay, next section is advanced placement, or AP. And here you can see, going back to 2019, a steady trend of the number of students in Glenridge High School that have elected to take an AP course, and the number of exams. You see a steady trend, and I'll show a graphic of that soon. And something we're really proud of is just the philosophy that we have here at the high school is to be very inclusive for the number of students that can take AP courses and take those AP exams. And we know that, the majority of our students are continuing their education after high school, and we want to make sure that they have opportunities to take rigorous college-level classes while they're here in the building. Another way we achieve this idea of being inclusive is the range of types of courses that we offer. So from STEM courses to English language arts, the world languages. As I was speaking before, the senior year students often take AP level of those languages. In the visual arts, social studies. So there's a whole host of courses that we offer, and you can see for a very small school, we offer a large number of courses to give students, we have some students that are across the board taking AP classes, but we also have students that, hey, you know what, I'm really interested in photography, and that's an option, 2D art, to do a portfolio for advanced placement. US history, world history, econ. So there's a lot of different options for our students. There's a graph you can see from back to 2013 showing that trend of being very inclusive with enrollment in AP classes. And before we get into the recognition, I just want to, there's always, these are a lot of numbers, right? 300 students, 800 exams. But there's always a lot of good stories in the numbers. One is just the logistics that go into it, right? Over 2 weeks, we're administering all these different exams in these subjects, so it is huge heavy lifting on the part of our school counselors. Mr. Rothweiler, oversees it. Winnie's very helpful as far as the technology, because a lot of these assessments are now computer-based. And we re-outfitted our gymnasiums with Wi-Fi so that we can use them as testing locations. Our vice principal, Mr. Phoenix, helping with the schedules and the proctoring, so it's a huge heavy lift. So the amount of logistics that go to provide our students with really optimal testing conditions is remarkable, and it's a really credit to their efforts. Some of the courses, in mathematics, we had a new teacher teaching it, Aaron Chamberlain, for the first time. All our averages for that were far above the state averages in both Calc A, B, and BC. Several years ago, we moved world history to the freshman class, and as a senior elective, we saw it kind of like floundering along, like below the state's kind of averages, and then we moved it to freshmen as one of their required courses if they want to take it at that level, and they've been doing great for freshmen to achieve that. And you see it on test day where maybe if you don't have a junior, senior, maybe not heard of something called senioritis, maybe no. For the parents of older kids, yes. So sometimes our seniors, they get into school, they're admitted, they kind of they maybe take a little step back, but the freshmen, they're walking into these testing rooms, and they're with their study groups, and they're cramming last minute, and they're so excited, and they're so invested in it, and it comes out in the results. So that's the kind of things I'm talking about. Like the numbers are great, but the stories that you see day in and day out, what's happening in the classroom, what the teachers are doing, it's really a great thing to say. And there you can see some of the results, both individual students, the AP Scholars with distinction, with honor, and then the AP Scholars bases on the number of courses they take and the outcomes that they achieve. The capstone program, which we have presented to the board in the past, is a really wonderful program where it's a two-part program called Seminar and Research, and the students are doing really college-level, inquiry-based type of research, picking their own topics, presenting. It's a really fantastic program. The AP, it's hard to see that graphic down there. The blue one says the AP Computer Science. Computer Science A, that was a recognition Glen Ridge received for the number of female students taking AP Computer Science. Over 50% of the enrollment were female, which is a tremendous, something we're really proud of and something we really encourage. So, and then this was a new one, the AP International Diploma. We had 2 students achieve that through, they had to take, similar to the seal of biliteracy, so they took the AP level of a world language plus an AP English class, and then they had to take 5 other classes in various disciplines, and then they had to also then be looking to apply to schools abroad. So we had 2 students who achieved that last year, which was really neat. And lastly, you can see the number of students receiving AP recognition. Something we're very proud of is our graduation rate. We make sure that, here is a small school, we make sure all our students are hitting those requirements and graduating and moving on. And then, while we don't want to, run around flying a flag about awards, but it is pretty neat to see that we were, number 11, according to U.S. News and World Report, in the state of New Jersey, 198 in the country. The New Jersey one, we also like to put a little asterisk there that, numbers 1 through 10 were admissions-based schools. So we're the number 1 non-admission-based school in the state, which is something we're proud of. So, okay. All right, Mr. Arlington?
Yep, happy to talk through this. So as Dr. Donovan mentioned, our students perform exceptionally well, but that doesn't mean we're not always looking for ways to improve. And so this slide I think is really exciting because it outlines some of the current work we're engaged in, both to increase some of those numbers that you saw, but also to make for a more engaging, enriching teaching and learning experience for our students. So as Dr. Donovan mentioned, so much of our work in recent years has been around early literacy, and so that work will continue, particularly with the opportunity to relook at our English language arts curricula across grades pre-K through 12. Next year, the state will be releasing new updated math standards, and that always opens up opportunities to rethink our instruction, the resources we use, the instructional materials, so that's something also to look forward to. Mike talked a little bit about the science test and our results, and last year we implemented a revised science curricula, so this year is a prime opportunity to sort of monitor and make adjustments to see how it's working. And then the addition of Linkit is a data warehouse, and that helps teachers aggregate and look at their data in different ways to help them use that to drive their instruction. 2 points that I buzzed over, but I want to spend just a minute talking about, because I talked about them a lot at the GRACE presentation I did a few weeks ago. The biggest one is our movement or transition from an INRS model, an intervention and referral services model, to a more tiered system of supports for students. So what that means is looking at students who struggle and finding different entry points into their learning, but also thinking about high quality tier 1 instruction in the classroom whether that's through small group, differentiation via, process, product, content, and environment as a first step to making sure all students' learning needs are met, and then thinking about different tiers of instruction. So a tier 2 might be more small group, might be more intervention-based, and tier 3 might even deepen that work or might lead to special ed, but that's not always the case. But I think by moving towards an MTSS, an NJTSS model, we're moving towards a more dynamic, more responsive approach to instruction than we were in an INRS model. So that's something really exciting, and also ties into ideas around universal design for learning. Later in the week, or hopefully next week, I'll be sharing out a screencast of the GRACE presentation I did a couple weeks ago, where I talk more about universal design for learning. So if that's something you're interested in, I hope you check that out. Yeah. Happy to take questions from the board at this time.
Board members, any questions on any of the testing report? Heather?
I was just curious, because I'm pretty sure Livingston offers the seal of biliteracy for languages they don't actually have in school. And I'm wondering if we do that as well for the kids who maybe took, Japanese class every Saturday while they were growing up or stuff like that. I know they have Hindi, and I know they don't offer Hindi and a whole bunch of other things.
Yes, actually has come up for the first time this year. We have a student who is looking to take the seal of biliteracy assessment in, I think it's Turkish. And as long as they should take one of the assessments that are on the approved list with the BOE and send us the results, we process it for just like we do all the other students.
Other questions from the board?
The AP capstone, that's for juniors, correct?
So the capstone program is 2 courses, and usually our students start it in sophomore year with the seminar course, and then continue on either junior year, or then they might skip it through the schedule and then take this follow-up piece, which is research in their senior year. So
Okay.
it's done over 2 years, and either they do it concurrently, back-to-back, or they'll do it sophomore and senior year, or maybe junior and senior year.
Do they work with their guidance counselor on that, or is it an English teacher?
So it's taught by Mr. Hanson, who's an English teacher.
Okay,
So the English department collaborates when they're looking at recommendations, but it is definitely a conversation that the student should have with their school counselor when we do the presentations for the next year's schedules.
okay.
Talk about capstone and what to do with it.
Okay, and then the slide, right before the biliteracy slide, can we go back to that real quick? Yeah, because one of those scores sort of piqued my interest. Yeah, so you said the percentage in paren is the state average. So for 2024, not graduation ready was 14.2, and the state was 45.3.
Correct.
Okay, got it.
And that's kind of where I was going with
Yeah.
the number of students in a lot of districts that have to go through that portfolio process
Mm-hmm.
because of struggling on the mathematics side of the state assessment.
Okay, and if they don't pass this, they have the opportunity to take it again, or, did I hear you say something like their SAT or PSAT score would be equivalent?
Correct. So when you take it in the fall, you're able to then, if you don't pass NJGPA, you can use a PSAT, SAT, or ACT score, those cut scores that's in our program studies, as an alternative.
Mm-hmm.
The ones that don't hit that cut score for those assessments, then we work on the portfolio up in the year.
Got it, okay, thank you.
Other questions from the board? There'll be an opportunity for public questions in just a few minutes when we get to the public comments section, so hold those questions. Okay,
Thank you very much, guys. Yep.
I believe we still have some more of the superintendent's report, yes?
Good evening again, everybody. Excited to present some updates around the thinking and the sort of group conversations we've been having in district about the role of cell phones, and wanting to frame that into a larger conversation about what it means to be future ready, and the ways in which cell phones either coalesce with that vision for future ready learning or bumps up against it, or not to think in dichotomizing ways, maybe it does both at different times. Yeah, so What I'm hopeful tonight to share with the board and the community is a presentation that identifies different entry points into this really big conversation that's happening in Glen Ridge, but of course happening across the state, the nation, and internationally too, right? So like, where do we, as a Glen Ridge school community, enter into the conversation? And then once we're in, how could we articulate a plan of action to achieve the aims that I hope we achieve collectively this year as a community? And so the conversation is about cell phones, but it's also about digital wellness, and what do we want our students to know and be able to do in the 21st century, and how does technology contribute to those goals? And so this conversation about cell phones that I've been having with my team, with a group of engaged parents, has been about promoting health and wellness, developing digital citizens, but also thinking about what are the conditions that students need in our school, but in this sort of socio-political moment, to support a focused learning environment. And so this slide shares a bunch of data that you're very familiar with, and this conversation about cell phones nests inside some of these key facts and tensions. We'll put this presentation up on the website so you can take a closer look, but we know that cell phones cause distractions, they have academic impact, they may have or contribute to behavioral issues, and we also know that some of our neighboring districts locally, but countries more globally, have enacted different restrictions. And so I think we need to be thinking about what can we learn, what lessons learned from them can we take and apply to our own current contexts, right? But others, on the other sort of flip side of that coin, argue that there is an opportunity to learn with cell phones. So how do cell phones help students develop self-regulatory behaviors? We'll hear, or we've heard from parents who like cell phones in schools because it helps them keep connected to their children. Some also feel, in cases of emergency preparedness, they're important. And I have, if you are interested in looking deeper into the language of the slides, some italicized fonts that say some people feel these ways, because we also know there's a ton of data that says cell phones in emergencies actually are problematic. So I'm trying to present a sort of balanced view here. One thing I think is really important, and that's why I have it bolded there, is that all learning needs to be scaffolded to meet kids' developmental age and learning needs. So what's good for a third grader is not necessarily good for an eighth grader, which is not necessarily good for a 12th grader. And so as an educational community, we know that our instruction looks different at different grade levels. Does that mean we have a scaffolded approach to cell phones in schools too? Maybe we do, maybe we don't, but I think it's a dimension and a consideration that we need to take up and consider closely. These are our current practices at RAS and Glen Ridge Middle School. The phones are away all day, and at the high school they're away during instructional time, which means students have access to them in passing lunch, etc. So keep this as a frame as we talk through, or as I share through some other ideas and possibilities. In the spring, Dr. Donovan and Mr. Lawler sent out a survey to their community. It had 551 respondents. I think it's important that we look at some of what that data says to help drive the conversation moving forward. So I just have 3 sound bites or 3 snippets that I think paint a bit of a picture in the context of this presentation. So if you look here, I think the big takeaway is that the respondents were mostly parents or guardians of 3rd through 8th graders, with 24% of the respondents being high school parents or guardians. And so this question asks, how concerned are you about your child's device interfering during the school day with academics, socialization, and or behaviors? So 44% say not at all, 25% say somewhat, and like 31% say very concerned. Again, this is mostly 3 through 8th grade. And I stress that because I'm going to circle back to why that's important coming up. And then a majority, 61%, of the survey respondents indicated that they would appreciate or support some type of district implementing policy, ensuring phones and devices were out of the student's possession during the school day. Okay, so in my work around this topic, as I mentioned, have been trying to broaden the conversation. And I think that once it's broadened, one way to enter into it is to focus on these areas throughout the course of the year. And so with some colleagues, with some parents, I've been thinking through what does it look like to have a real sustained conversation where we try to rally as many people together as possible to welcome varied viewpoints into the conversation and focus on community engagement, policies and regulations, look at curriculum, I'll talk a little bit about that, and then engage students in the conversation. Okay, so community engagement I think is critically important, and so we can have these conversations in schools about the impacts of cell phones, but they need to be had at home too, and then there needs to be some synergy between those conversations and what they sound like. So I think there's an opportunity this year to have some focus groups and structured dialogue around our cell phone practices and what's working and what's not. I think a really strong, impactful way to do that is after we engage in some communal learning. So I know years ago we showed, is that the best way to say it, I guess? Had a screening of screenagers, but I think collectively we think it's time to do that again. There are lots of new families in town, particularly based on everyone's reading of The Anxious Generation and related podcasts. It's probably a great time to anchor to one common experience, which could be the viewing of screenagers, and use that to inform the conversation moving forward. So we're excited to announce here that we have a screening set up for November 21st, which will be moderated by Lauren Moriello. She's a licensed psychotherapist, and she'll talk a little bit about how we make strong connections between home and school around what we believe in cell phones. I've seen her present and worked with her before. She's really powerful, and so too is the second opportunity we want to engage in, which is in January, date TBD, talking a bit about the impact of screens and social media, what parents must know and do. Again, having those common shared experiences, we think, will help to enrich the conversation and sort of deepen our approach to the work. We also know that there's a real strong curricular component to this conversation, especially if we hone in on digital wellness. So much of digital literacy, or there's a great deal of digital literacy already being taught in our schools. We probably need to do a stronger job communicating that out and sharing with the community where these topics live in our curriculum and how they're taught. So we've been talking about the possibility of creating a map where we can see like what the mini lessons are or what the units of study are in the different grade levels and the different courses. When that map is complete, we might be able to see what's missing and how we might be able to fill in the gaps. And then also think more deeply about our resources and instructional strategies to increase our efforts to create digitally well students. Something we've been talking about at the policy committee level of the BOE is how we may go about crafting policy language. So the away for the day in grades 3 to 8, and then in 9-12, the away during instructional time are really the regulatory components, right? Those are the regulations, the rules we follow, but what does the board believe in about the role of cell phones in school, particularly as it relates to future-ready teaching and learning? That's work that I'm going to suggest we engage in this year because I think it's about values and beliefs, and I just think that makes sense. And then, of course, we'll look at the practices or the regulatory things we have in place now to see what's working and what's not. It's amazing how oftentimes in schools, students aren't part of the conversation. So I think I learned a long time ago, if you want to know what school is like for kids, ask kids. So we want to have them as part of the conversations. I've been saying in all of my introductory presentations, I believe kids have agency and have lots of ideas to contribute to what school is like for them. So let's welcome them into the conversation. I know something we've been talking about is the importance of not only having these community engagement efforts like screening screenagers, but making sure students are part of that, the audience that night too, right? To make for a really collective mix of ideas and voices. So I'm always thinking about how the work puzzles into a bigger picture. So this plan that I'm outlining to study, to engage, to excite, hopefully, over the course of the year, definitely has strong dimensions that connect to future-ready work and encourages bidirectional conversation. At the end of the day, it will be an some of these decisions will be administrative and recommended to the board, but certainly there's a place for lots and lots of contributions. And so I think that helps to create a collaborative environment, which we know future-ready teaching and learning values. We also really want to look at data-driven decision-making. The survey that was done in the spring, let's broaden that. Maybe we think about how to make that a district-wide survey. There's this sentiment that sometimes people have survey fatigue, but I think I've learned that people don't have survey fatigue. They have fatigue from taking surveys and nothing happens with the results. So maybe we make something happen with the results. And then, of course, I think this approach, which is angling to be adaptive and inclusive, is also innovative because everyone's contribution becomes part of an all-important mix. And so this first event is on November 21st. And I know Deirdre, Jess, and Lori have been really instrumental in the conversation about this work. And so we'll be meeting soon to talk about how to get as many families to this Thursday, November 21st event as possible as a sort of informal launch to some of this bigger plan that we can thoughtfully engage in together across the year as a school community. Happy to take questions from the board now and the public later.
Okay, board question? Heather?
So away for the instruction time, does that mean you have a hanging thing on the wall for cell phones in each classroom, or is that more like it's supposed to be in your bag?
I've seen both. I've seen in my formal walkthroughs, I haven't been in every classroom yet. I see some teachers with baskets, some teachers with hanging things, some teachers trusting kids to put them away. Thank you for that question.
Other questions from the board?
In terms of the outreach and including the community students as well, how will people self-select into the focus groups, or will there be a selection process? What do you imagine that will be?
I haven't yet, but that's certainly a consideration that we need to imagine soon. I'm hoping that this announcement, this screening will excite people that don't want to be part of the focus group. We're certainly not going to turn anyone away. It's just a matter of, I think, structuring the groups to be as productive and efficient as possible. Yeah. We've also been talking a lot, or some, about student representatives and how to bring them into the fold of the board a little bit more. And so, Maggie, you are cordially welcome to this opportunity, and we look forward to having your voice as part of the process. Yeah.
Any other questions from the board? Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I just have 2 agenda notes for to close out my report. At this time, I'd respectfully request that we table 2 recommendations, P2 and the second part of A1, policy 8454. Starting with the latter, I recommend tabling policy P8454 pending further conversation by the policy committee. And regarding P2, I suggest tabling the item to provide the leadership team with additional time to share more details about the process of how we secure coaches and to work through feedback we've received. Questions about those?
Board member questions on those 2 tabled items?
All right.
Questions?
That concludes my report. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. All right, now we are ready to have the public comment portion of the meeting for questions or comments on agenda items, including the reports that you've just heard. Some of you know our protocols, but for those who don't, if you have a question or comment, please step up to the lectern, sign in, tell us your name, verify your Glen Ridge residency. If you have multiple questions, if you are part of a group or an organization and representing that organization, let us know what that is. If you have written testimony, please hand it to Mrs. Murphy for inclusion in the record. You have 2 minutes. Again, this is for agenda items only. We have a second public comment period at the end for agenda items or any other items pertaining to the running of the schools. I will be timing you with my handy stopwatch here. It's a 2-minute time limit. Now, does anyone have questions or comments? Please.
Very short, sorry. My name's Lori Davis. I live at 209 Ridgewood Avenue. I've got a 4th grader at Raz, and I had a daughter who went through 8th grade and is now in private school. I first of all just want to thank Mr. Arlington for the presentation about cell phones. We've been meeting with a group, and we really appreciate all of his efforts and how thoughtful he's been about this initiative. I'm really here basically to make sure that we can advocate for your support as the board in leading our district, like so many others, in making our schools smartphone free. The harms of smartphones are well known, well documented. We even know here that the HIB, harassment, intimidation, and bullying incidents have decreased when cell phone policies were enacted. We also know that when our policies are inconsistent or not enforced, kids will ignore them. I live right across the street. I see all of the kids at this building on every break, on every fire drill. They're glued to their devices. They're not engaging with each other face to face. They're staring down at their phones, disengaged. Last year when my daughter was in 8th grade, she tried to contact me several times during the day. This year she's at a school with a very strictly enforced cell phone policy, and I never hear from her until that bell at the end of the day. I really feel that the existing policy here is inadequate. It puts the onus on individual classroom teachers, which we know have many other responsibilities and should be able to focus on educating, not on banning smartphones, or policing them rather. And the existing policy also in the high school does not specify restrictions for hallways or free periods, which are times when it's in some ways most important that these students are able to connect with one another, and it's also the time when they can use those phones for harm. It's my hope that we can do like other districts in Fairfield, Connecticut, Newark, New York City, in developing these strong policies. Just quickly, last year, the School of the Future, a public school in Manhattan, began requiring students to use Yonder phone locking pouches for the entirety of the school day. And the initiative was described as, quote, a massive success, citing increased student engagement in the classroom, less time spent in the bathrooms and hallways, more genuine connections within the community, and a decrease in reports of cyberbullying. I respectfully request that this district adopt a district-wide policy to keep phones out of our schools as soon as possible. We can do this as a community if we work together and take it seriously. Thank you.
Other questions or comments? Yes, please.
Hi, thank you for having me. My name is Jess Filipovich. I have 2 children in the Glen Ridge school system. I'm also here to advocate for the Glen Ridge schools to adopt a strict policy to keep smartphones out of our schools. The school system is the reason that my husband and I moved to Glen Ridge to raise our family, and I know I'm not alone in wanting Glen Ridge to remain a high-performing school district. We're many years into this smartphone experiment, and the data, both anecdotal and scientific, is all extremely clear. Phones are detrimental on every level in a learning environment. There's the social emotional piece. Smartphones make kids and adults more anxious, more depressed, and less social. But putting that very important piece aside, phones simply make kids less able to learn from their teachers and from each other, especially when they have phones out in between classes. And that's what they're here to do in school. One recent study found that even when a phone is sitting inside a backpack next to a student, that student's cognitive ability is reduced. which I think is very related to the whole point about where are these phones during class. There is no learning and developmental upside to having smartphones in our schools and many serious downsides. It is undebatable that smartphones take a serious toll on adolescents' ability to focus, think, read, and reason, and the effects on their rapidly developing brains may well be permanent. So I'm so appreciative that we're having this conversation, but I'm also have to be like, why are we even having this conversation, right? We have all of this data. Throughout the world, smartphones are being banned, as Kyle noted, in learning environments because they negatively impact the quality of education. Last year, UNESCO called for a worldwide ban on smartphones in schools, no matter what age the user, citing the results of a 14-country study of phone use in schools. The report found that countries that have enacted phone bans in their schools, like Norway and Belgium, have seen improved academic performance.
If
So
you could finish up, please.
Sure. If our top-notch Glenridge schools are going to stay that way, it is time that we enact our own zero-tolerance smartphone policy. Thank you.
Thank you. Other questions or comments?
I'm Deirdre Carlo. I have 3 children in the Glenridge schools, a 6th grader, 4th grader, and kindergartner. And I've had the pleasure of working along with Kyle and Jessica and Lori and some other parents. And I think we've covered a lot of the facts. I think we all know the detriment of phones in the schools. I just want to say that since these conversations have started and we've done some outreach with parents, the overwhelming support has been amazing. I think that parents see the detriment and they want to work together. So I just hope that we can take the opportunity to really work together as a community and change the policy and just have a better future for the kids. I think that we have to stop seeing this as a punishment in taking away the phones and really see it as a gift for not only the students, but also for our amazing teachers and the staff. Thanks.
Thank you. Other questions or comments? Yes, please.
Hi there.
Hi.
Hi there. My name is Jennifer Anderson. I'm at 77 Midland Avenue, a resident of Glenridge. I have 4 kids in the school district, a 9th grader, 8th grader, 6th grader, and 1st grader. So in all the schools right now. My children, my 9th grader and my 8th grader recently received cell phones. It was something they had to earn and achieve. It was something that I did not feel that, my family didn't feel that they needed at any earlier than 8th grade. When my daughter did receive her cell phone in 8th grade, I was very disappointed. She had a lot of time on the screen that she was watching movies in school, about 2.5 hours worth of a movie in a day. She reported, again, this is just an 8th grader's perception, so I understand that it's just her perception. It was during PE time, hallways, study hall. If a teacher was out, it was when they had a substitute. I fixed that within my own household. She no longer took her cell phone to school in her 8th grade year when we found that out in January. So we kept it home. She was not allowed to bring it to school. She earned that back coming to school in 9th grade. She's not watching movies anymore. But one thing that did disappoint me was when I took it away from her last year, she was still listening to things because her friends would share her AirPods. So I felt that no matter how much I tried to control it within my own family, they were still being exposed because their friends had it. Same thing applies to my 8th grader and 9th grader this year. If I see that they're using their cell phones, if they try to reach out to my husband or I, or sometimes they're ordering things, them and their friends are starting to order things and have them delivered to the school during the school hours, they lose their cell phone. So I'm just disappointed that they have access to it, not only throughout the school day, but also that they're able to do things like, purchase items and share things with their friends, their classmates. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm sorry, one more point. I was very happy with the strict policies that Ridgewood Ave has. I felt that their policies, those teachers were enforced things. So I'm really impressed with Raz. And luckily, we don't have to worry about it at Linden.
Thank you. Other questions or comments?
Hi, I'm Kavita Kumar. I'm in 244 Ridgewood Avenue. Thanks so much for, about the whole cell phone topics that you're talking about. I also wanted to, oh, okay, sorry. I also want, in addition to cell phones, I also wanted to talk a little bit about smartwatches. That's also something that I'm seeing around a lot of the elementary school kids as well. So I have two kids. One is in second grade and the second one is in pre-K. But then there's a lot of it's not in school, but also about using the use of smartwatches. It definitely is a distraction amongst the kids. And then it's also about the equity issues as well, right? So one kid, like 2 or 3 kids in the class, in the school or in amongst the friend have a smartwatch, they'll start to ask for that as well. And it's the same thing around cyberbullying, privacy, all of those, and health concerns as well. So if you're thinking about cell phones, also think about other smart devices and wearable devices that could, like smartwatches, etc. So thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, everybody. James Corden, 42 Hillside Avenue. I have an 8th grader and a 6th grader. Also on the cell phone, smartphone topic, and forgive me, I wasn't expecting to speak, so if I'm all over the place, that's on me. But just 2 main points. One is I want to make sure that we are not conflating the idea of technology and, sort of digital life in school and smartphones. The idea that these kids are going to be in a technological and, digital environment for the rest of their life is absolutely true. And we should prepare them for that with structured education around those topics. Smartphones are a completely and totally separate item that I also agree really has no place in these schools at all. It's downside only, and it just, trying to police from a parent perspective is almost impossible if you don't have the complete school buy-in. To one point that actually Kyle brought up that I think is interesting, which is the idea of needing to be in touch in the event of an emergency. On an emotional level, I really understand that. From a parent perspective, I really understand that. We had a real-world anecdotal example of that this year when we had the lockdown because of Bloomfield. I, myself, and a bunch of other parents immediately started getting phone calls from the kids, right? The calls couldn't go through, right? Everybody was on the phone. Everybody was freaking out. And the kids were all turning their attention to their parents to try to give them an answer and give them a fix in an environment that their parents could do nothing about it, right? And so while it emotionally makes sense, practically it makes things worse, right? They need to be focused on getting the information from the human beings who are the adults in the room at the time, right? And as much as I'd love to, there's nothing I can do about it. And I just really think that's an important point.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Other questions or comments?
Hi, I'm Kim Engel. I live at 326 Washington Street in Glen Ridge. And I just wanted to say that I would love for us to have a strict policy about being cell phone, smartphone free. In the district, I have a 4th grader and a 2nd grader, and neither one of my children have smartphones. And if I can avoid having them to have to go through this, I just think it would be such an amazing thing for them to not have to go through what these children are going through now with having to navigate this, and parents having to navigate how to protect them. If we can have them not have their smartphones for 7 hours a day when they're in school, and then in activities, I think that that would just free up so much of their, intellectual ability to learn and to socialize and all the other things that the research shows. So thanks so much for listening to all the parents, and thank you guys for all your work.
Thank you all for coming. Any other questions or comments? Yes.
Hi, Matt Doyle, 90 Baldwin Street. I have 2 young daughters in 4th and 6th grade. I guess mainly I want to just voice my agreement with kind of what everyone else has said already. I don't want to reiterate and go over too much again. I guess my main question was, Mr. Arlington, you spoke a lot about kind of feedback you've gotten from parents and wanting to have students involved in the discussion. I was wondering if you could speak at all about how the teachers feel, just in general.
That's, I can't answer that.
Okay.
My principal colleagues can, but obviously teachers will be an important part of the process too. I think when I articulated community engagement, I included them. If I wasn't explicit about that, I apologize.
Oh, no, no.
But they're definitely a stakeholder group whose input matters.
Other questions or comments? All right. As I said, there will be another opportunity at the end of the meeting. The board will now continue with our regular business. This is not our first meeting of the month, so we normally do not have committee and liaison reports at this time, but of course, we have our student representative, and I see that you are ready to go, so please.
Hi, everyone. 2 weeks ago, the Student Council hosted the Homecoming Dance, where we made $1,880, and we estimate that the attendance was about 70% of the student body, which is very successful. So we also had a Spirit Week leading up to that, and the football team had a really big win against Verona for the homecoming game. At the college fair, we had a full gym with an amazing variety of schools. Most of our athletic teams are gearing up for their state tournaments, which start this coming week. Football has their first states game this Saturday at home. Marching band has nationals at MetLife this Saturday morning. And the girls' tennis team made it to their sectional finals, where they were runner-up. The AAPI Club is hosting a Diwali celebration tomorrow night in the cafeteria. And on Thursday, we will have our annual senior Halloween breakfast, where seniors will get the chance to show off their costumes and vote in various contest categories. Many are also taking the opportunity to go and read at Linden, Forest, and Central. And this is also the first year that we have opened up an invitation for middle schoolers to dress up as well. Typically, it's only seniors. And the chorus is performing at Radio City Music Hall on November 22nd. And finally, on November 13th, the school is hosting signing day for the 6 seniors who are committing to play Division I athletics in college. Thank you.
Thank you. Board members, any questions for our student rep? Okay, thank you. Any other committee or liaison news or announcements that are time sensitive? Nope. Okay. All right. You have in your packets minutes from October 1st and October 8th. October 1st, executive session and regular meeting. October 8th, which was our board mini retreat, which was also legally a public meeting. Does anyone have any changes to any of those minutes? That being said, I'm sorry, Jocelyn, may I have a motion for those minutes?
I move item M1.
May I have a second?
Second.
Second from Anthony. Since there are no changes, Barbara, would you call the roll?
Ms. Akinwande?
Aye.
Mr. Bonnet?
Aye.
Mr. Denard?
Yes.
Ms. Gottlieb?
Yes.
Ms. Graham?
Aye.
Dr. Yaros Ramos?
Aye.
Ms. Ginsburg?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Okay. Administrative items. Anthony, would you move the administrative items?
I would move administrative item A1 through A6.
Okay. May I have a second?
Second, with just a note that we're tabling.
Tabling the-
A1
yes.
to 8454 policy.
Yes. Okay, and so you've seconded with that proviso. Okay? All right. Any discussion on any of those administrative items? Seeing none, Barbara, would you call the roll?
Ms. Akinwande?
Aye.
Mr. Bonnet?
Aye.
Mr. Denard?
Yes.
Ms. Gottlieb?
Yes, abstaining from item A6.
Ms. Graham?
Yes.
Dr. Yaros Ramos?
Aye.
Ms. Ginsburg?
Aye.
Motion carries.
Okay. Let's see. Jocelyn, would you move the personnel items with the exception of the tabled item as noted?
Sure. I move items E1 through E11.
Okay, may I have a second?
Second.
Second from Tricia. In keeping with the board members' code of ethics and our rules, we do not discuss personnel items in public session. That being the case, Barbara, would you call the roll?
Ms. Akinwande?
Aye.
Mr. Bonnet?
Aye.
Mr. Denard?
Yes.
Ms. Gottlieb?
Yes.
Ms. Graham?
Yes.
Dr. Yaris Ramos?
Aye.
Ms. Ginsburg?
Aye.
Motion carries.
Okay. Heather, would you move the curriculum items?
Sure, I move C1 and C2.
Okay, lots of field trips. May I have a second? Second from Jocelyn. Any discussion on the curriculum items? That being the case, Barbara, would you call the roll?
Ms. Akinwande?
Aye.
Mr. Bonnet?
Aye.
Mr. Denard?
Yes.
Ms. Gottlieb?
Yes.
Ms. Graham?
Yes.
Dr. Yaris Ramos?
Aye.
Ms. Ginsburg?
Aye.
Motion carries.
Okay, Duval, would you move the business items?
Sure. B1 through B4.
Okay. May I have a second? Second from Heather. Any discussion, board members, on the business items? Bless you. Yes, and before we have a vote on the business items, I would draw your attention to the items under B3, which are donations from Van and Liz Taylor residents to a piano and piano installation to the Ridgewood Avenue Home and School Association. Thank you for that piano. I know it was much needed. Also from Richard Gall, office supplies, 30 binders. I have 30 binders in my home office at least. Generous donation from Mr. Gall. And from the Glenridge High School Home and School Association, a monetary donation for 2 new cafeteria tables. I know they're the foldable tables that are easier to move for the Glenridge High School. So thank you to all those generous donors. And now we've been moved and seconded. Any further discussion on these items? Okay, Barbara, would you call the roll?
Ms. Akinwande?
Aye.
Mr. Bonnet?
Aye.
Mr. Denard?
Yes.
Ms. Gottlieb? Ms. Graham?
Yes.
Dr. Yaris Ramos?
Aye.
Ms. Ginsburg?
Aye.
Motion carries.
Okay, we've come very quickly to the second public comment period for comments or questions on agenda items or any items pertaining to the running of the schools. The protocols are the same. Does anyone have a question or comment? No? All right, that being the case, may I have a motion to adjourn?
Motion.
Moved by Anthony, may I have a second?